Do you have a favorite bad movie?
In terms of so bad it's good, or one that just feels kind of gratifying to hate on?
We'll go with either one, and then talk about the other one after you're done with the first.
Oh boy, I can't think of a so bad it's good. You know, I'm just not a believer in the whole guilty pleasure thing. If I enjoy something, it's worth doing. So I've got my comfort films, you know, Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
I love that movie.
Oh, isn't it incredible?
Edgar Wright, man, he is just, yeah.
Yeah, I've probably seen that 5 times now, and I kind of regret not going to see it when they dropped it in cinemas a couple weeks ago. Yeah, delightful film. You know, Studio Ghibli films like My Neighbor Totoro or Spirited Away are comfort films that I can watch over and over again. So I don't feel guilty about that. I just love those films. But as far as films that it's not necessarily that I love to shit on them, but it certainly was cathartic to write about how terrible they were. And this was certainly a polarizing one, but Joker, I don't think the directors were sophisticated enough to know what the hell they were talking about or what their ultimate point was. And their view of mental health care would have been outdated in the 1980s, let alone in the time period of the film. And the whole notion of, you know, the Joker is mentally ill and there's a strong connection between his mental illness and violence just does an immense disservice. So it felt gratifying and cathartic to write about those things. And then, you know, when I see directors and writers punching down, it feels good to write about that too. So those god-awful Pure Flix films that are all about those evil atheists, you know, the first God's Not Dead, where it's, you know, evangelical porn, where of course the evil atheist gets hit by a car and dies at the end. It's just utterly abominable. And similarly, a number of recent Clint Eastwood films, the one about Richard Jewell, where of course that pesky journalist is sleeping with her sources to get her story. I mean, talk about misogyny. Or a couple of his recent films are about those evil Middle Eastern terrorists. And just, you know, do we really need to hate on a group that is being hated on by our president at the time? So in those cases, it's kind of gratifying to analyze those films and point out why they are so problematic at this time.
Mm-hmm. What mistakes do you think young or first-time filmmakers do?
I think it harkens back to over-reliance on overused technique, or not challenging the formula. But I guess I would kind of push back on that a little bit, because I think so many times directors start out being full of ideas and excited, and then they're in danger of kind of selling out to the bigger system. Not to say this is going to happen with her, but Chloe Zhao, for example, who directed the Oscar winner this year, Nomadland. Her next film is going to be in the Marvel comic universe, and I really hope she brings something clever and inventive to it. I hope she's more of a Ryan Coogler doing Black Panther than a Kenneth Branagh directing Thor. And
that first Thor movie was painful.
It was. And yeah, you know, I know I'm dumping on the comic hero movies a bit, but I actually do enjoy them, in part because they're a good way to bond with my kids. They love the film, so I love going to the films with them. And sometimes they're well done, and I think they're doing some good social work. I think in representation when it comes to Black Panther, haven't seen The Falcon and the Winter Soldier yet, but I hear something, you know, virtuous is done in a similar fashion there. So, you know, props to them for, you know, not just having white male superheroes and then, you know, female superheroes in skimpy garb, that they're moving beyond those kind of retrograde ideas.
Right. Is Black Panther your favorite MCU movie?
It probably would be. Yeah. And I guess this one doesn't count, but Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I really, the animation and just the subversion of what you expected in the storytelling were just delightful through the whole thing.
I have not seen the Snyder cut of Justice League.
Can't say I have either.
Okay. I tried watching the Whedon version on a plane. I was flying cross country, and I just couldn't watch it.
Okay.
It didn't hold my attention.
Yeah. What's the last DC one that I watched? It was the one that introduced Wonder Woman before she had her own film, whatever that one was called. Was that Batman versus Superman?
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, that was painful too.
Quite so.
Yeah.
Have you walked out on a movie, and if so, which movie?
No, I've not recently. The Joker film was a family outing, and so I sat with my wife and daughter through that one, getting increasingly squirmy as it went on. I don't know if I don't think I would have walked out on that one, just because I knew there was enough there that I wanted to write about it. What I do more so, especially in this day of, you know, virtual screeners and everything, again, because I don't like punching down at, you know, individuals who are trying to break into the movie making world. So I'll watch a film for 30 minutes, and if it just doesn't grab me, I'll turn it off. And there are plenty that I do that, and especially as we've gotten to a point where there are less options, new options that are coming out on virtual cinemas. It sometimes seems like I have to wade through 2 or 3 films for every one that I watch all the way through.
How do you, or if you do, separate the art from the artist?
Yeah, good question. And as a shrink, I probably am overly guilty of going into psychobiography, of looking into connections between the director's life and the themes that they focus on.
Woody Allen.
Woody Allen, yes, and Manhattan, yeah, for sure. But in a more benign way, and Wes Anderson has been candid about this, at least, so it's not a reach, you know, that his experience of his parents divorcing when he was a child plays into his repetitive theme of the man-child who is a semi or fully shitty parent having a sort of moral awakening. So yeah, I'm definitely tempted by the psychobiography, but on the other hand, I'm a believer in having immense respect for directors who are not one-hit wonders, but who create a coherent body of work. So Wes Anderson, Kurosawa are great examples of that. I think Chloe Zhao shows immense promise in that direction. And at least the 2 films that I've watched, I didn't watch her first one, but The Rider and Nomadland just are beautiful films and great use of the natural surrounding, but they look at individuals who typically don't get their stories told and do it in a way that is very realistic and very empathic. So I hope she continues. Barry Jenkins is another one where I utterly love the aesthetic that he brought to films like Moonlight and the James Baldwin adaptation of Beale Street Could Talk. So And there obviously is a passion on his part for civil rights and amplifying Black voices. So, so yeah, I don't want to go over the top with psychobiography, but I love to see when directors have a great body of work and they continue to go back to similar themes and deepen their explorations.
Right, right. Last night I saw I think it's the newest rendition of Rear Window, which is the Amy Adams movie, Woman in the Window. I enjoyed it.
Okay, I was going to ask, what did you think of it?
It was a pretty movie. Easy on the eyes. I mean, not just her, of course, because she's not pretty in the movie. She's not supposed to be physically, attractive in the movie. And there was the twist, the end of the second act twist, which I did not see coming. And I really liked the original Hitchcock movie, to tell you the truth.
Oh, same here. Same here.
So I thought it was okay. I mean, it isn't something that I need to see again.
Yeah.
But I don't think I wasted my time.
Okay, cool, cool. I have not gotten around to that one yet. I think that dropped the same week that There Is No Evil came out. So again, it was just kind of picking and choosing, okay, what do I want to watch? What do I think I'm more likely to write about? And There Is No Evil. It's by Iranian director Mohammad Razalov. And talk about a gutsy guy. I mean, he is actually facing prison time for his filmmaking. And in this one, he analyzes the application of the death penalty in Iran, and does so in a vignette style, in part shot in vignette, just because they were less likely to get in trouble shooting 30-minute films as opposed to doing an entire 2-hour saga. But in interviews, he said one of the things that he wanted to convey in the film, that even in a repressive society, you have the choice to say no. And just what an incredible thing to hear. And from a guy who is not just in an ivory tower, but is actually living it. So, but anyway, back to Hitchcock. I share your fanaticism for Rear Window. It's another one of those films that I can watch umpteen times and still dig it, along with Vertigo, Psycho. Vertigo is just incredible. And Hitchcock is just such a fascinating figure. And there again, it's hard not to get into the psychobiography there. He clearly struggled with quite a bit of Catholic guilt. Enjoyed the voyeur role, but had, guilt about it. Therefore, Psycho, peering through the little peephole in the hotel, or Rear Window, which is all about voyeurism. And of course, he felt like the ugly duckling, and was a total creep to the blondes on his sets.
Yeah. Switching gears a bit, you came from a pretty religious background.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and I was baptized as an infant into the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, which is the most conservative branch of it in this country. And from elementary school on, was an every Sunday go to church kid. When it was Advent or the Holy Weeks, the Holy Months, going on Wednesday evenings, youth group, all that good stuff. And then when the time came, went to the Lutheran high school in my town. And, my parents were not overly zealous about it. They were not the preaching type. They weren't drilling Bible verse memorization into us or anything. But when I was in high school, I had a conversion experience, which happened to coincide approximately with the time that my mother took ill with cancer and died. So it kind of filled a meaning gap in my life. Why do horrible things happen? Well, she's in heaven with Jesus now, and thank God for the resurrection. So so it filled that gap in a at least temporarily satisfying way. And then my aspiration as an adolescent was to end up on the mission field as a medical missionary. So went to Central America when I was in college for 2.5 months. And as a young adult, went to Vietnam twice doing medical work. So yeah, I was in for a penny, in for a pound for sure.
Wow. I was reading in your blog that you lived in Connecticut and then moved down to Tennessee.
Yep.
Sounds like a culture shock.
Just a bit. Just a bit. Yeah, I was born in Baltimore and then did my residency in Hartford, Connecticut, and got a very appealing job offer where I could do psychotherapy and psychiatric care for combat veterans with PTSD at the local VA. And so I was like, let's do it. So ended up living in East Tennessee from 2004 to 2021. And yeah, it was a little bit different than, godless New England, where you have the pretty churches on the town square, but the religiosity is not overpowering. Whereas I think in comparison, I think the percentage of evangelicals in Tennessee is about 30% of the population, and another 45% are some form of Christian. So yeah, it was quite different. And then of course, seeing how it's spilled over into social issues where every politician in our region has to be pro-Bible, anti-abortion, pro-gun, and, God forbid that anybody, talk about Black Lives Mattering.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want you to incriminate yourself on this. But I like asking this question of my guests.
Sure.
Is faith mental illness?
No, it's not. That's a bridge I'm not okay crossing. I guess I think it is a maladaptive coping tool, but that doesn't equal mental illness. And I don't see the benefit in pathologizing it to that degree. I think there's value in using evidence-based diagnoses or assessment tools. And yeah, post-traumatic stress disorder is a real thing. Borderline personality disorder is a real thing. It's been studied, validated, revalidated. Yeah, I just don't see that being helpful for mental illness. But I think we can look at, there is a strong element of denial, wish fulfillment, ways that it is, and I speak from personal experience, I think it is emotionally and individually stunting and societally stunting to be a part of that. So yeah, it's maladaptive, but I wouldn't pathologize it to that extent, especially, when its belief is still so prevalent. I'm not ready to label 80% of the population or whatever the number is as mentally ill because they're theists.
Right.
What's your take on that?
I think some extreme forms of evangelical Christianity, for an example, a very loose connection with reality. Yeah. Some of the hardcore followers, zealots, have. And if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, I don't have a PhD, I don't have an MD. I have worked with people who have mental illness, for people who are survivors of brain trauma, traumatic brain injury survivors. And there's a lot of religiosity going on there in psychotic states.
Mm-hmm. Oh, unquestionably. And it's fascinating to see how culturally bound those things are. yeah, with psychosis, whether it's hearing Jesus' voice or being demonically oppressed, you're going to hear those things a hell of a lot more in the Bible Belt than you are in comparably godless Washington. And obsessive compulsive disorder. I work in one locale with an immigrant and refugee based population. So I work with a number of individuals who are of the Islamic faith, and seeing the hand washing mixed with the ritual ablutions of their Islamic faith has been an eye-opener working in that setting. Whereas for the fundagelical, it would be more the compulsive praying, the confessing of sins that bleeds over from being in keeping with their culture, but becomes pathological and a part of that syndrome. Yeah.
Regardless of how you feel about Freud, he did mention there was this kind of obsessive compulsive nature to aspects of religion.
Oh, sure. And I think Erik Erikson, one of the great psychoanalysts of the 20th century, looked at the biography of Martin Luther and saw his compulsive praying had very, very strong components of obsessive compulsive disorder to it.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Religion, faith, mental illness, it's at times difficult to tease apart. Definitely.
And what makes it similarly tragic is so often religion is used as a shaming technique to prevent people from seeking treatment. You know, if you just believed harder, if you just prayed the right way, if you lived the right way, you wouldn't be depressed. You know, it's the bumper sticker that I used to see in the Bible Belt, too stressed to be depressed. I mean, what a load of horseshit. I mean, this is a diagnostic, you know, it is a psychiatric illness with a strong genetic and biochemical basis. It has nothing to do with, you know, whether you're too blessed to be depressed or not. Yeah, and living the Bible Belt as well, even working for a community mental health center, seeing in the psychotherapy progress notes how often these therapists would bring religion into the room where it was frankly unethical. You know, they're there to provide cognitive behavioral therapy. They're not there to talk about, you know, are you going to church, or what do you think the Bible tells you about anxiety?
How do you feel about Alcoholics Anonymous?
I think it's helped a hell of a lot of people. So in that sense, I'm a pragmatist. It works for a lot of people. Again, we're in a predominantly theistic society still, so they're going to look for that higher power to help them out. Whether I think it's a higher power that is keeping them from returning to the bottle, I don't. I think it's the psychological insight that Bill W. and his compadre, whose name escapes me, but the insights that they discovered about psychology and the benefit of socializing with individuals who are struggling in similar ways. So if a patient tells me they're doing AA or even Celebrate Recovery, which is the much more evangelical variety of it, and if it's working for them, you know, if it makes, you know, if it enables them to stay away from drinking or stay away from the drugs, more power to them. You know, I would love to see, you know, rational recovery and non-theistic varieties get more of a toehold. And I think they will as our society becomes more and more godless. I think it's very cool that the Satanic Temple is getting into recovery. And it's not 12 steps, obviously, but it's a certain number of tenets that, again, I think are psychologically sound, and they keep all the woo out of it.
Mm-hmm. You touched on this earlier about that you're part of a generation that was trained and focused on talking therapy, as well as the medical aspect of the field. How has that changed over time?
It's changed immensely. Goodness, it's been a decade since I could be reimbursed to provide psychotherapy. So it's been insurance company driven. They will not reimburse the psychiatrist typically to provide psychotherapeutic services. They want to pay a lower amount to someone who has a master's in social work or who is a PhD rather than an MD. And in a similar vein, I think you're seeing the training change. So my residency training director in Connecticut was a Freudian psychoanalyst. And so he and his compadres made sure that we got 50% training in psychotherapy, 50% in neuropsychiatry and in pharmacology. And I think that balance has shifted immensely from, I've been on the faculty of a couple universities over the years and have definitely seen the balance change in what kind of training is done.
Mm-hmm. From my experience, once again, doing some casework and just bringing people into seeing, their psychiatrist, very short, truncated amount of time.
Yep.
Asking the questions.
Yeah.
Then writing the script.
Yeah, and there's truth to that. Sadly, so much in hospital and healthcare systems is about productivity, and are you meeting your productivity benchmark? So, for example, when I started doing the PTSD work, when I moved to East Tennessee, I had 90 minutes or 2 hours with a new patient. Nowadays, we're lucky if we get an hour, and many systems give you 40 minutes to do a new assessment. So, yeah, so you're blowing through the diagnostic symptom questions, and you don't have as much to get to know the human being behind the symptoms. And yeah, something is definitely lost there. I definitely mourn for that.
What is the solution? Because you've dealt with insurance companies and you've seen obviously what the healthcare system is like here in the States. A lot of the people who view this channel on YouTube are from other countries, from Commonwealth countries.
Yeah.
What do you think is the solution to this miasma, this our healthcare system?
I take what I say with a big old grain of salt, because I'm not a systems expert by any means, but I think it's very telling that we are the only developed country that has not turned to socialized medicine in some form. So I think a single payer system would go a long way towards humanizing our system. There's no question in my mind about that part. And talking with colleagues overseas or reading what is done there, that there is not that productivity pressure. They can do freaking home visits with patients. So I think that would go a long way if we cut the insurance companies out and, it was just offered by virtue of living within the borders of a certain region. I think that's step number one. Beyond that, I'm not sure that I have the sophistication, or I'm not an MPH, so I don't have that knowledge base to see what else needs to be fixed. But that would be a hell of a good start.
Oh yeah, definitely. The last question I like to ask guests, and this isn't about plugs, or where people can find you online. Is there a question you wanted me to ask you, but I didn't? Is there a topic that you wanted to go over, but we just didn't get around to it?
None that jump out. I guess maybe how to become a more discerning and a broader film viewer. that's something that I'd be game to talk about a bit if you're game. Sure. Okay. I think in this day and age where things are so widely available, you've got Netflix, you've got Amazon, you've got YouTube, and especially in the pandemic, I have doubts that the big studios are going to go fully back to theatrical releases. So I think you have many, many options to choose from where you're not locked into the latest rom-com or Fast and the Furious Part 23. So I think it really helps to, find a couple of film critics that you dig. I'd be happy to be one of them, of course, but I have immense respect for Justin Chang I think he's at the LA Times now. Alyssa Wilkinson at Vox is a terrific writer. The writers at Roger Ebert have carried the torch admirably. Find ones that you respect. Rotten Tomatoes just doesn't cut it, that whole aggregated thing. So find some individual voices that resonate with you and see what they're digging, see what they're celebrating, because there's just so much artistry that is out there. And for example, one of the best films that I've seen in the past month dropped on Netflix with no fanfare whatsoever, called The Disciple, about a traditional raga singer who has this intense relationship with his teacher and is trying to find his own identity as an artist. And it's just something that I didn't even know what the hell a raga was until I watched the film. So I learned about a whole new, aspect of classical music that's been around for hundreds of years. And it was just done so artistfully and insightfully that it was another one of these films, I think it was 2 hours and it just flew by. Or, a film, the Ivory Coast has like no film industry whatsoever, but there was a magnificent film that came out last year that you can watch on Amazon called Night of the Kings. That is about the power of storytelling, whether it's in Ivory Coast, Africa, or whether it's in Boston, Massachusetts. But just does wonderful things with storytelling and immerses you in an environment that I've never seen before on the screen. So yeah, I think, there's something that I think about great cinema that can feel like taking your vitamins or eating your broccoli. And it doesn't have to be that. I think if a person gets over their fear of subtitles or things that don't have a big studio imprint, they're just so much horizon broadening that is out there.
True enough. True enough. Well, thanks for coming on the Laughing in Disbelief YouTube channel and talking about film and psychiatry and religion and whatever else we talked about in the last hour. Where can people find you online, sir?
Yeah, I'm a Patheos writer. So I'm looking at it right now, patheos.com/blog/Secular Cinephile. And like I said, I try to write 1 or 2 reviews a week. I cover 2 festivals a year. So next month I'll be covering the Full Frame Documentary Film Festival in Durham, North Carolina virtually. And knock on wood, I'll be going to Toronto in September to cover their festival. So yeah. Thanks for giving me the time to promote that a little bit. And you're a hell of an interviewer. It's been a pleasure conversing with you.
Well, thanks a lot. And to all the viewers, observers, and lurkers, thanks for watching this and sharing time with us. Take care, everyone.